Being a dungeon master or a DM in Dungeons & Dragons is a very daunting task. For those who don't know, a tabletop role-playing game like Dungeons & Dragons usually has playable characters, also known as PCs, and a dungeon master who describes the environment and what is happening in the game using storytelling and dice rolling. You basically become the engine that runs the game. You have to know all the rules and have to make the calls on how to interpret certain situations. You also have to control every character that the players aren't controlling. DMing is not for everyone. However, if you have an interest in creating worlds to play in, or if you have a group of friends that are interested in getting into D&D or other role-playing games, you should take the leap and become a DM. I personally became a DM after playing D&D as a playable character for a few sessions. I think it's one of the coolest experiences you can have as a tabletop gamer. I always enjoyed playing fantasy role-playing games. I first got into fantasy RPGs with Square Enix's Final Fantasy X. What I loved about 10 was the amazing story and the world that the game presents. I also enjoyed fantasy movies like Lord of the Rings. What makes DMing in a game like Dungeons & Dragons so great is the ability to sculpt the world that you want to create. I enjoy combining stories from different series to make a unique adventure for your players. If you've never been a DM or GM before, you'd be surprised by how much goes into creating a world. The Dungeon Master's Guide, also known as the DMG, for D&D 5th edition, tells you to establish the core assumptions about most D&D worlds to your players, like how the world is ancient, the world is magical, and the gods oversee the world. However, what's great about being a DM is that you can change all of this. Magic can be rare, the world can be new, and the deities of the world can be manipulated to just have few or no deities. Establishing the core assumptions of the world establishes the basis of the rest of the world. However, your players usually aren't interacting with the core assumptions of the world. They are living in the local town while trying to defend the town from attackers, or they are in a dungeon to find an NPC who is missing. As a DM, you get to establish the adventure and tropes. This is what is brilliant about role-playing games. You basically get to see the kind of story you want played out. You set the background, the initial story hooks, the villains, non-playable characters, the organizations, and the environments of the world. However, you don't have complete control of the game. Your players dictate much of what is going to happen in the game. I can't tell you how many times I've had a player ruin the idea I had for a story arc by killing a key character, or how my players decide to abandon a questline to go to another city and explore. Being a DM really tests your abilities to improvise, and to adjust to your players' needs. It's very rewarding to be able to plan out a grand story you have, and to have it play out after multiple changes during the adventure. Examples of this would be moving around when events take place and when your characters decide to do things out of your expected order, or having new villains replace your old ones that your players kill. Similar to your players, dice can impact how your story unfolds. Things that should be impossible for your characters can be made easy with lucky dice rolls. Your evil villains can also seem like wimps with unlucky dice rolls. In the end, the dice are what make tabletop RPGs games. Otherwise, you'd just be telling a story with friends. A lot of people who want to DM don't know where to start. Here's my advice for starting. Reading a starting adventure, like The Lost Mines of Phandelver, is a great way to start. That's how I started DMing, and I ended up deviating off the written path after 2 sessions. Watching shows like Critical Role can help DMing too, but don't worry about looking like a pro. Everyone is sloppy when they first start, but you get better over time. Have a rough draft of the story you want to tell. Have names, locations, events ready to go, but don't have the sequence of events planned out yet. Your players will decide in what order things happen. Figure out what your characters want to do. Sometimes your players want to be guided to situations, and sometimes they want to do whatever they want. If you feel like your players aren't enjoying your story, let them seek their own adventure and paths and drop adventure hooks that would interest them. Make sure your players feel extraordinary. Even at level 1, your players are more remarkable than regular villagers and city folk, and if your players feel like they're useless, they won't have fun. Put each player in a situation where they can show off how epic they are. Don't worry about having battle mats, miniatures, or sound effects. This is something that stressed me out, and it ended up costing me way more money than I needed to spend. To make it worse for me, my players actually enjoyed imagining the world over seeing miniatures and terrain. You can always replace all the visual stuff with your descriptions. And finally, make sure your role-playing game is fun for you and your players. If it's not fun for you, you won't feel motivated to keep it up. If your players don't have fun, you end up not having fun either. DMing for a role-playing game is a big task, but it's a very rewarding experience. You get to feel something that not many people try to do, weaving stories. It can be very satisfying to see the story that you've always wanted to tell, and your players will appreciate you. I hope I've convinced at least one person who's skeptical to try it out to give it a go. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. Both would really help me to know if people enjoy my content. Please also consider watching my previous 2 videos linked here. Thanks, and have a good day.